You're sitting in a coffee shop working on something you've been putting off for weeks. The table is cluttered, your posture is bad, you're half distracted, scrolling between tabs, accomplishing almost nothing. Then someone sits down across from you, a stranger. They open their laptop and start working. And suddenly, without deciding to, you sit up straighter. You close the irrelevant tabs, you start typing faster. You look focused, you feel focused. Nobody asked you to change, nobody said anything at all, but you did. Here's what's strange. You probably think you worked harder because you were motivated, or because the environment shifted, or because you simply felt like it. But here's what actually happened. You were being watched, and your brain rewired your entire behavior in response to that single fact. Not because of who was watching, not because of what they might think, just because eyes were present.
Psychologists have a name for this, the Hawthorne Effect. And once you understand it, you will never look at your own behavior the same way again. In the late 1920s, a group of researchers from Harvard arrived at the Hawthorne Works, a large electrical factory outside Chicago. They weren't there to study human psychology, they were there to study productivity. Specifically, they wanted to know what physical conditions made workers perform better, things like lighting, break schedules, and the layout of the factory floor. They started with something simple. They increased the lighting in one section of the plant. Productivity went up. They increased it again. Productivity went up again. Straightforward enough. Then they tried something unexpected. They reduced the lighting, brought it back down, dimmer than it had been at the start, and productivity went up again. That shouldn't have happened, but it did. Every time the researchers made a change, any change, output improved. It didn't matter what the change was. More breaks, fewer breaks, longer hours, shorter hours, the workers kept performing better.
When the study eventually ended and the researchers left, productivity dropped back to where it had been before. The researchers slowly understood what they had actually been measuring. It wasn't lighting, it wasn't break schedules, it was the fact that the workers knew they were being observed. That awareness alone, the simple knowledge that someone was paying attention, changed how they worked. The conditions were almost irrelevant. The watching was everything. A second wave of studies reinforced this. Researchers observed students taking exams when a camera was placed in the corner of the room, even a camera that was visibly switched off. Students scored higher, they guessed less, they checked their work more carefully. The camera wasn't recording anything, it didn't matter. The shape of the eye was enough. So why does this happen? Because your brain is not primarily designed to perform, it is designed to survive. And for most of human history, being watched meant something. It meant a predator had spotted you. It meant a rival was studying your weakness. It meant the group was evaluating whether you were useful, whether you belonged, whether you were safe to keep around.
Being watched was never neutral. It was always a signal. So your nervous system developed a response. When observed, sharpen, focus, perform. Suppress the careless habits. Show the best version of the behavior because something is at stake. This is not a conscious decision. You do not think someone is watching, therefore I should work harder. It happens beneath thought. The brain detects the social presence and upgrades its output automatically, the way it would tighten your grip if you felt yourself slipping. You are, in a very literal sense, a different organism when you are watched. This plays out everywhere, in ways so ordinary they've become invisible. Students who sit in the front row of a classroom, closer to the teacher's line of sight, consistently perform better than those in the back. Not because they're smarter, not because the instruction is clearer, because they feel seen.
Employees who work in open-plan offices where managers can observe them report higher self-consciousness and show measurable changes in work habits even when no one is actively looking. The possibility of observation is enough. Athletes perform differently in front of crowds than in empty stadiums. Not always better, sometimes the effect becomes pressure and collapses into anxiety, but always differently. The biology shifts. And then there's social media, a platform built almost entirely on the architecture of observation. Every post made with an imagined audience in mind, every caption rewritten 3 times, every photo taken at a specific angle. You are performing not for a room of people, but for an abstract, invisible crowd that exists mostly in your own projection. The followers may never see it, the engagement may never come, but the awareness that someone could be watching is enough to change how you present yourself, what you share, what you hide, how you frame your ordinary life as something worth watching.
The Hawthorne Effect has scaled to a civilization. But here is what most people get wrong about this. They assume the Hawthorne Effect is about deception, about pretending to be better than you are, about putting on a performance for someone else's benefit. And so they treat it with suspicion, as if the behavior it produces is somehow less real, less valid, less you. That is the wrong frame entirely. The version of you that performs under observation is still you. In many cases, it is a more capable version, more focused, more deliberate, more careful. The question is not whether the behavior is authentic.
The question is why that version of yourself requires an audience to appear. What if the watching could come from inside? Some researchers have explored this. When people write down their goals and imagine a specific person reading them, their follow-through increases. When people work in front of a mirror, literally seeing themselves, the quality and consistency of their effort improves. When people keep a visible record of their progress, they sustain behavior longer than those who track nothing. The observer doesn't have to be real. It just has to feel present. This is the insight the original Hawthorne researchers never quite reached. They saw the effect as a contamination of their data, a confounding variable that ruined their study. They didn't see that the effect itself was the finding. That observation is not an interruption of natural behavior. Observation is a condition that changes what natural behavior even means.
Now think about your own life. Think about the version of yourself that shows up when someone is counting on you, when a colleague is waiting for your work, when a friend is expecting you at the gym, when someone you respect is going to ask you how it went. Think about how different that version is from the one that exists when no one will ever know. Think about the projects you started in private and quietly abandoned, the habits you built in isolation and slowly let dissolve, the ambitions you held loosely because no one was holding you accountable to them. Think about the moments you held back, in a meeting, in a conversation, in a creative decision, because you weren't sure anyone was watching, and so you told yourself it didn't matter enough to try. Think about the emails you rewrote carefully because you knew they'd be read, the presentations you rehearsed because there would be a room full of faces, the work you actually finished because there was a deadline and someone would notice if it wasn't done.
That gap between what you do when watched and what you do when you're not, that gap is not a character flaw. It is a biological inheritance. It is your nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do. But knowing that gives you a choice. You can build the conditions for observation into your own life. Tell someone your intentions, work in public, set up external accountability, not because you don't trust yourself, but because your brain responds to it. Use the effect instead of being used by it. You don't need to wait for someone to notice you to become the version of yourself that performs like someone might. The watcher was always you.